The air in the little antique shop was thick with the scent of old wood and leather. Hidden among the crowded shelves and glass cases was a treasure trove of curiosities. Faded photographs, tarnished silverware, cracked porcelain dolls, and crumbling books whose pages had long yellowed with age. It was a place that drew in wanderers, dreamers, and those seeking a glimpse into the past. The shopkeeper, an old man with wild, white hair and a hunched back, barely looked up from his counter as the door creaked open and a customer entered. Mark Sutton stepped in cautiously, his eyes scanning the room. He wasn't the type to frequent antique stores, but something about this one had called to him. Maybe it was the gloom of the overcast day, or the weariness that had settled over his life in recent months. His job was stressful, his personal relationships strained, and the world seemed to press down on him like a weight he could no longer carry. He needed something, anything, to distract himself. As Mark wandered through the aisles, his fingers brushed lightly over various objects. None of them sparked any real interest until, tucked in the back corner of a shelf, he saw it. A small wooden cube, no larger than a deck of cards, carved with intricate geometric designs on every side. Something about the cube drew him closer. "Ah, I see you found the puzzle cube," the shopkeeper's voice rasped from behind him. Mark turned to find the old man staring at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "It's a unique piece," the shopkeeper continued, hobbling over. "Not many like it in the world." Mark picked up the cube and turned it over in his hands. The carvings were delicate, almost hypnotic, as though they shifted and changed when viewed from different angles. "What kind of puzzle is it?" The old man smiled, his yellow teeth peeking through cracked lips. "A puzzle of fate. Solve it, and you may have a wish granted. But beware, there is always a price." Mark raised an eyebrow. "A price?" The shopkeeper nodded, his expression growing more serious. "The puzzle grants your wish, but each time it does, it bestows a curse upon someone you know. The only way to lift the curse is to solve the puzzle again, but it becomes more difficult each time. And with every solution comes a new wish and a new curse." Mark laughed nervously, assuming the man was telling a fanciful story to justify the price. "So, how much is it?" The shopkeeper's eyes gleamed. "For you? $100. Mark hesitated. The cube was beautiful, and he loved the challenge, but the price seemed steep for something so small. Still, he felt an unexplainable urge to take it, like it was calling to him, whispering promises of relief from his burdens. "All right," Mark said, handing over the cash. "I'll take it." As the shopkeeper placed the cube in a small velvet pouch, he leaned in closer to Mark, his voice low. "Remember, once you solve it, you can't undo what's been done. Each wish brings with it a curse." Mark nodded absently, already thinking about where he might put the cube in his apartment. That night, after work, Mark sat at his kitchen table, the puzzle cube in front of him. He turned it over in his hands, marveling at the craftsmanship. The carving seemed almost to pulse, as though alive with some hidden energy. He pressed a section, and to his surprise, it shifted slightly under his touch. Intrigued, he began to work at the puzzle. At first, it was easy, sections sliding and twisting as if guiding him toward the solution. He lost track of time, his frustration with work, with his strained relationship with his girlfriend Rachel, melting away as he became absorbed in the cube. Click! The final piece slid into place, and the cube suddenly came apart, its pieces rearranging themselves into a new form. A faint breeze seemed to pass through the room, though all the windows were closed. Mark blinked, stunned. Did I solve it? No sooner had the thought crossed his mind than his phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel. "I don't know how to say this, but I think we need some time apart." His heart sank. They had been arguing a lot lately, but he hadn't expected this. He dialed her number, but the call went straight to voicemail. Mark sat in stunned silence. Had he just been dumped? He looked at the puzzle cube on the table, unease creeping into his thoughts. The shopkeeper's words echoed in his mind. A wish granted, but a curse bestowed. In a moment of desperation, Mark whispered a wish. I just want things to be normal with Rachel again. The next morning, Mark awoke to find a message from Rachel. Hey, I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean what I said. Can we talk? Relief flooded him. It had worked. Somehow, the puzzle cube had granted his wish. He could hardly believe it. But as the day wore on, a growing sense of dread gnawed at the edges of his mind. If the wish had been granted, what was the curse? He couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. That night, his phone rang. It was his brother, David. Mark, it's Mom. She's in the hospital. They're not sure what's wrong, but she's in a coma. It happened suddenly. Mark's blood ran cold. His mind raced, connecting the dots. The curse. His mother had been cursed because of the wish. Frantically, Mark grabbed the puzzle cube and began working at it again, desperate to solve it. But this time, the puzzle was different, harder. The pieces didn't move as easily, and the more he worked at it, the more complex it became. Hours passed and frustration set in, but finally, after what felt like an eternity, he solved it again. The pieces clicked into place, and he gasped as the puzzle reconfigured itself. I wish my mom would be okay, he whispered. The next morning, his brother called. Mark, it's a miracle. Mom woke up this morning. She's completely fine. The doctors can't explain it. Mark should have been relieved, but the shopkeeper's warning lingered in his mind. The curse had been lifted from his mother, but now someone else would suffer. His mind was a whirlwind of anxiety as he tried to figure out who the next victim would be. He didn't have to wait long to find out. That night, his best friend Jake called, his voice trembling. Mark, I don't know how to say this, but I've been having these terrible nightmares. It's like something's watching me. I can't sleep. I don't know what's happening. Mark's heart sank. The curse had claimed another victim. Desperate, he grabbed the cube once more. But this time, the puzzle was nearly impossible. The pieces resisted his every move, shifting in ways that made no sense. Hours passed and days. His obsession with solving the puzzle consumed him, leaving little room for anything else in his life. Rachel, concerned for him, tried to help, but he pushed her away. He couldn't let her get involved. He couldn't risk cursing her. But the more he worked at the puzzle, the more his mind unraveled. Each time he solved it, he made a wish, one more desperate than the last. And each time, the puzzle grew harder, the curses more severe. His friends fell ill, his colleagues suffered accidents, and those he loved were slowly destroyed by the puzzle's malice. Soon, Mark found himself completely isolated, haunted by the knowledge that every time he solved the puzzle, he was dooming someone else. The faces of those he had cursed haunted his dreams, their eyes filled with accusation and pain. Finally, the day came when he couldn't solve the puzzle anymore. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how many hours he spent hunched over the cube, it refused to yield. Driven to the brink of madness, Mark locked himself away, unable to face the world. His mind fractured, consumed by guilt and fear. The puzzle had become his tormentor, an unsolvable riddle that held the fates of those he loved in its cruel grasp. And so, Mark Sutton disappeared from the world, a man lost to the twisted machinations of a cursed puzzle cube. His apartment remained undisturbed, save for the faint sound of clicking as the cube's pieces shifted on their own, mocking him with the impossibility of escape. For Mark had learned too late that some puzzles were never meant to be solved.